Hello, today is Monday, October 27th, and welcome to episode 519 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking America. I'm NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, and I'm joined today by Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and Fellow Jessica Jones. Today we were discussing the Trump Asia tour. President Trump has been moving through Asia, Malaysia to Japan and on to South Korea, and will be closing on a Thursday face-to-face with Chinese Xi Jinping at the APEC meeting. And we hear that it could lock in a rare truce to a turbulent year, and perhaps turbulent years. Negotiators say that a substantial framework is ready for signature. It would include quarterly check-ins, substantial Chinese purchases of U.S. agriculture, particularly soybeans, and a new verification track to choke off fentanyl precursor chemicals into the United States. In addition to that, the Beijing, which had threatened a global export licensing regime on rare earth minerals to all exports of that, has actually been tabled at least for a year. When Donald Trump had presented the idea of a 100% tariff threat. So, and then in addition to that, officials say the TikTok deal's final architecture was hammered out in Madrid and that the technical details are aligned for approval. So, look, we've got a package that cools tariffs, shores up farm exports for U.S. farmers, stabilizes critical minerals, and puts enforcement on fentanyl, we think. All right, so I want to turn first to Morgan. What do you see as success factors for this meeting with President Xi?
So I think the fact that they're meeting to begin with is a positive development. The last time President Trump met with Xi was in 2019. And since, Donald Trump took the presidency, tensions with China have only heightened. I think what we saw yesterday with Scott Bessent, taking to the Sunday shows, was that this is an opportunity for the, temperature to be brought down a bit, for tensions to cool off, and potentially, find a way forward on a broader trade deal. At the same time, though, it's unclear right now whether or not this is just going to be a, simmering down and cooling off and trying to sort of go back to sort of like a blank slate in which we can move forward on a more robust trade deal, or if this is actually the start of something bigger, right? I think we would all really like to see progress when it comes to critical minerals. China owns or has control of about 90% of the world's critical minerals. This clearly is very important for the United States from a national security perspective, and something that I think we would like to see a resolution to. So I think, what we're seeing is, the rhetoric is where it should be. We're moving in the right direction, but I think it's going to take a lot longer to determine whether or not we're going to see real results.
Mm-hmm. Jess, one thing I was curious about, I don't know, we didn't talk about it for the podcast, but apparently the Chinese this week snubbed the German government's request for meetings. I think there was only one meeting offered to the German government after the German foreign minister had planned a big trip. So it was all scrapped. And then in addition, notably, China did not send a congratulatory note to the new Japanese PM. So I find it interesting, this contrast with, talk of a major deal with the United States on the horizon, while U.S. allies are being snubbed.
I mean, to the story, we first have at hand, I think we were all, welcoming a potential deal coming down later this week. I think both here at home and the global markets are like, okay, some steadiness. Tariffs, 100% tariffs, the U.S.'s announcement, 100% tariffs, that's going to be abated. We're going to see a delay in these rare earth restrictions. Soybean imports are resuming, great for American farmers. And then if you take a step back, it makes me wonder if this is just where we started. All of these walkbacks are, in fact, were China's moves in reaction to U.S. escalatory actions and tougher talks when it came to trade negotiations. And so I'm not really sure if we walk back 8 months, if we come out really ahead of where we started. Even the TikTok deal, TikTok was supposed to be divested. The framework we're hearing is that ByteDance continues to be the owner and that the US will own, I think, algorithms and have some governance board positions. So even that doesn't seem like, I'll put it in air quotes, a complete win. And we now see, I think, long-term rare earths are becoming a real bargaining chip on the table in the way that was implicit before. To Morgan's point, the rest of the world knows Chinese dominance when it comes to rare earths, but it wasn't on the table as we're going to restrict these. And so it's great that the U.S. has a 12-month delay in potentially those restrictions, but that's not long enough, I think, to build up our own supply chain security when it comes to rare earths. And so China might see itself as a stronger, it's got more leverage when it comes to the global stage right now, because they don't see these maybe as much as concessions as some long-term positioning wins. And so they might feel a little more freedom to, knock off some delegations there, do some less, visits or meetings. And I think they might, it's left open whether I think countries now see trade flows and trade talks with the U.S. is kind of going with the wind. They can go either way. It can change really quickly. We saw what happened with Canada-U.S. negotiations over a video of Ronald Reagan, and all of a sudden, talking is stopping. So I think countries are building that into their relationship with the U.S. and that they're not really sure what they're going to get. And so whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for the U.S., not really sure. And maybe China is still trying to figure that out too, whether they have more room to play now that the U.S. isn't seen as maybe as stable partner as it did before.
So Lester, I think, there's been some talk that President Trump would like to also achieve some movement or concessions from China in terms of helping bring an end to the war in Ukraine. Do you think that's on the table, first of all? Is that going to be a topic of discussion? And two, if so, will the Chinese be helpful?
Well, that depends on what the U.S. is willing to do. Are we willing to slap real sanctions on China over purchases of Russian energy? I don't think we are. I think we've avoided that strenuously. I think the negotiations here as such that have, at least the ones that have been in the headlines, are a little absurd. We're not going to tariff China at 100%. They are not going to long-term cut us off from rare earth supplies. So there's this kind of weird negotiating going back and forth that is phantasmal, right? I think no serious person takes either one of those issues super seriously. There are a couple of interesting tweaks. Maybe the TikTok issue getting off the table kind of frees up the Trump administration to be a little more creative with Xi Jinping. But at the end of the day, the thing that matters is the U.S. economy. And if we were to really punish China, either with massive tariffs or sanctions over the Ukraine war, we would be impacting our own economy very negatively. And the president's just not going to do that. He's too interested in being popular and having the market thrive, which it currently is, because there's this good news on a possible China deal. So there's kind of the negotiations that seem to be happening in headlines and chyrons, and then maybe what's really going on behind the scenes, which is a much more conventional market access intellectual property conversation that every administration has had with China.
Well, on that note, I think we can call it for the day. We will be following this closely as the week, the developments proceed. Perhaps we'll have a recap on Friday to examine, how things have gone. So on that note, that's a wrap. Thanks as always to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff that helped producing today's episode. Join us on Wednesday, October 29th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast to get you smart fast on the national security foreign policy debates shaking up America. We are on YouTube, so check us out there. And if you like what you heard or saw, rate and review and subscribe.